Well, 2020 sucks shit. Luckily for me, as a lonely idiot stuck at home, the entertainment industry found a way to persevere yet again. And though it may feel like a year starved of movies, considering literally everything there was to be excited about has been delayed until eventually, it ultimately turned out to be a good thing, since I got to check out a bunch of stuff I wouldn't have otherwise, instead of the usual 15 Marvel movies. So to commemorate one of the only good parts of this dumpster fire of a year, I thought I'd go through the best and worst movies I saw in 2020, though in more of a casual and laid-back style as opposed to my normal videos. I'm probably going to be repeating myself a lot since I don't do this very often, so I apologize in advance for that. Now, I won't be spoiling anything in this video in case any of these pique your interest and you want to check them out for yourself, so most of the footage shown will just be from trailers. And if you're confused whether I mean I'm going to be talking about the best and worst movies that came out this year, or the best and worst movies I saw this year, my answer is yes. We're doing both. Starting with 2020 releases first though. Worst to best, let's go. Yep, I'm really starting with this. It came out in 2020 and I watched it, so that means I have to talk about it. One of the highlights of my year was a close friend of mine beginning a bi-monthly Disney movie night in which we would binge many shitty DComs all in the span of several hours. Hours I'll never get back. During these nights, I experienced the horror that was the Descendants trilogy, but also the greatness of the incredible Teen Beach movie. The worst of them all, though, was Zombies 2, a sequel to the hilarious Zombies, which was a comedy/musical about zombies integrating into normal society after having their cannibalistic tendencies suppressed by government-issued wristbands using soothing electromagnetic pulses in what I assume is a very subtle allegory for racism. And yes, I know that makes it sound like the best thing ever. While the first was absolutely hysterical for all the wrong reasons, I think watching its recent sequel immediately after made it all the more painful. Zombies 2 introduces werewolves into the fray, and look, I don't like to throw the word cringe around very often, but I'm the alpha, I'm the leader, I'm the one to trust. What is this? Now, I am entirely aware that this is made for children, but at least the first one had some bangers in it, okay? There are no excuses as to why this was so agonizing to watch.
Tearing down the power plant. You're welcome, Seabrook, I'm your man.
Like, you got some pretty good choreography for some of the dance scenes, but like, you just have to watch this one to understand why I hate it so much, okay?
I'm picking up the scent, it seems we're on the right track.
There's this part where Zed the zombie, the protagonist of the epic zombie saga, thinks that Addison, his now girlfriend since the end of the first movie, is losing interest in him because she speaks to another guy for 0.5 seconds, and that of all things is what triggers their obligatory sad breakup song. And then there's a bit later on where they have a fucking zombie werewolf rap battle in the middle of some random street. What the fuck is this movie? This has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Did we watch the same thing? The worst part of all though is that they tease a possible Zombies 3 at the end, and I just know that he's going to make me watch that one as well. It is incredible to me that Robert Rodriguez has been doing these weird-ass kids films for about 20 years now, and he has not even slightly updated the quality of the effects for all of that time. This is the pseudo Sharkboy and Lava Girl sequel, for those who still don't know, that isn't a sequel in any way and just kind of has them in it. I think my favorite part would easily be that they had to recast Sharkboy because for some strange reason, Taylor Lautner didn't want to be involved in this movie, and as a result, Sharkboy does not say a single line in the entire thing. Was also very disappointed by the lack of a Dream Journal or Mr. Electric, I must say. I know a lot of people were really wanting me to talk about this one, but I honestly just don't have all that much to say about it. I had to recruit my brother's help to make it through the second half because it was just such a miserable watch. Nothing in We Can Be Heroes is surprising. One look at the poster is all you need to know exactly what you're going to get from it, right down to the music choices. There's so many characters in this group of superpowered kids, I couldn't even keep up with who had what power. And much of the humor is derived from like the same one or two jokes from them, which believe me, got very tiring after about 5 minutes. I think it's alright for some so bad it's good moments. Like, if you're watching this with a good group of friends, then you probably have an okay time with it, but I can't imagine subjecting even kids to this. So yeah, basically, it's a Robert Rodriguez movie. This one. The Babysitter was a dumb but fun Netflix movie that I enjoyed very much for what it was, which surprised me considering it's a movie with King Bark in it.
Hey dog, get some ice cream?
The sequel, however...
Shit.
Instead of doing anything new, Killer Queen just rehashes the original movie, but with everyone being slightly older. And they make sure to constantly beat you over the head with the fact that it's a sequel, as if that justifies them doing the exact same thing again. They continue on a lot of the running jokes from the original film, which were fine in that one, but to me were just diminishing returns this time. They also perform an unnecessary and totally out of left field character assassination of one of the best characters from the first movie, so that was neat. Yeah, at least the shirtless guy was back. He was still the highlight. Christopher Nolan's latest blockbuster masterpiece single-handedly saved cinemas. I really enjoyed the part where I couldn't hear a single fucking thing anyone was saying because the audio mixing was so abysmal. Scoob was a thing this year. I actually have a funny story about this one, which I'm going to tell because I have so few things to say about the actual movie. When Scoob had just come out, I was browsing Twitter threads about it, only to find that someone had posted a very shady download link for supposedly the full movie. And out of pure curiosity, I clicked on it, only to find out that it actually was the full movie. In HD. So basically, I accidentally pirated Scoob. Moral of the story, click on shady links on Twitter. As for the film itself though, I'd say the animation was really nice, and I quite liked the slight tweaks to the designs of Mystery Inc. I also have to admit I laughed every time they said dick, because I am less mature than this movie's target audience.
My friends call me Dick.
The focus on the superhero cinematic universe elements as opposed to what people actually like about Scooby-Doo was definitely to the film's detriment, and it ends up being pretty forgettable as a result. Aside from having a completely batshit ending that I still can't believe happened, I also really don't know what was going on with the dialogue.
Blake drops some F-bombs! Hey man, whoa, let's keep it PG.
I'm not sure if we'll be getting any more movies out of this Hanna-Barbera animated universe now, but I can't say I'd be keen to check out any more of these. Okay, I'm still a little upset about this one. I really love the first Bill and Ted movie, and the sequel is somehow even wackier, so I was super excited for a third to come out. It seemed like the perfect distraction from this year. But after coming back from the theater, Face the Music just felt really cheap. I don't know if that's the right word exactly, but it felt more like a TV movie at times, which is strange for something with the budget it had. I'm not sure if that's because of the lackluster effects or the humor, which for the most part really didn't work for me. Introduced because of the enormous time gap from the last movie were Bill and Ted's daughters, who were probably my favorite part aside from Bill and Ted themselves. The way that they nailed their father's mannerisms was super impressive. I really wanted to enjoy this one a lot more than I did, and I'm hoping it'll get better if I watch it again, but Face the Music had to be my biggest disappointment of the year, aside from the actual year itself. Enola Holmes was another effort from Netflix this year and showed that Millie Bobby Brown can be really good in a lead role when the script is written by someone above the age of 5 years old. The plot didn't particularly interest me for a majority of it, to be honest, mainly because there's two conflicting plots for most of the runtime until one kind of fizzles out until right at the very end. The mystery wasn't as satisfying as I think it wanted to be, and some of the editing was pretty unnecessary, especially when it came to the reveals of things. Yes, movie, I am aware that Enola is alone backwards. Thank you for reminding me 7 times. I also can't say I was a fan of the constant fourth wall breaks. They more took me out of it than they did make me feel involved, but Millie delivered them in a charming enough way. I just can't get over Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes. He's so incredibly buff, I was distracted every time he was on screen. How does someone even get that buff? Having never seen either of the previous 2 movies, Bad Boys for Life was more or less exactly what I expected, just with some nicer cinematography. I don't know how else to describe how I feel about this movie, aside from saying that it felt like an AI was working from a checklist of basic action movie tropes and then melded them all together for the final result. And despite all that, I kind of liked it. Its strongest aspect is definitely in how it looks. They put a surprising amount of effort into making the action scenes look really nice. It was definitely the most memorable part for me. Everything else though, I already feel like I've seen 100 times in other movies. Although I have a feeling I would have appreciated it more had I seen the other 2, so I'll get on that soon. One of my proudest achievements of this year was finally getting into the elusive Fate series, courtesy of a friend of mine who forced me to sit through the entirety of Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, a series just as confusing as the title is. I know I didn't hate it, it's just really not my thing to be honest, despite some very strong animation, which I assume the studio can afford because a majority of the show is just characters standing around talking and explaining how the plot works. Fate Stay Night Heaven's Field 3 Spring Song Jesus is quite obviously the third in a trilogy, animating an alternate route of the game that the series is based off of. The first 2 films I felt were huge improvements to the show, but sadly this one was more in line with what I had come to expect. As I said before, my biggest complaint about the series is all of the expository dialogue that takes up a solid 70% of the show's runtime, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that the previous 2 films somehow managed to avoid this. Well, I guess they saved it all for this one because they just did not shut the fuck up! Around midway, Spring Song kinda lost me with its plot, so I really felt no connection to the ending or resolution for the characters. I know the series is notorious for being confusing, but come on! But it certainly delivered on the series' trademark stellar battle animation, so at least there was that. After taking 400 years to come out, I was hell-bent on watching the New Mutants purely out of curiosity, and I liked it. I have to agree with the general consensus that it would have been improved had the horror elements had more of a focus and were more consistent, which is very annoying because that's exactly what everyone who watched it said, and what the director himself said, but then the studio was like, nah. There's a lot of mature subject matter that's integrated into the story really naturally too, and didn't feel out of place to me, which I really appreciated. Initially, I couldn't say I was fond of any of the main 5 characters, but they all grew on me by the end. Even magic, who started out as cartoonishly evil. It still didn't feel like a fully fledged superhero horror to me, which I still think is an idea that could work really well and kind of already has. But I think the New Mutants' scattered direction is more the studio's fault than anything. In spite of all those problems, I still had a pretty good time with it. The ending definitely didn't go the way I thought it would though, let me tell you. As a very big fan of alien horror, I was very excited to watch Sputnik, which did not turn out to be what I expected at all. Overall, I can't help but feel underwhelmed by this one. The soundtrack was fantastic, some of the shots looked really nice, and the CG and effects work were all extremely well done. But it is a bit of a slow burn that doesn't amount to a final act as satisfying as what I had hoped. If anything, it feels a bit restrained, though maybe it's because I went into this anticipating a horror when in actuality it's more of a thriller drama. I quite like the premise though. It certainly was a far cry from the Russian alien-like movie set in space I thought it would be, although that name is very cheeky when you work out the meaning of it. Violet Evergarden is a gorgeously animated series that I made the genius decision to watch while on the bus to school last year, because the only proper way to appreciate all of the hard work and care put into the visuals is to be constantly worrying about hiding it from the people sitting behind me. I'm assuming that's the reason that despite the incredible presentation that KyoAni is so known for, this series really didn't do all that much for me, because it's been very well received. Like, I liked it, without a doubt, but it just hasn't stuck with me like a lot of other anime I've seen. Despite that though, I really wanted to see how the series concluded since the show wrapped up on a very open-ended note. And though it had been a while since I'd been with these characters, Violet Evergarden the movie continued on from the show several years later to wrap up a few of the loose plot threads left hanging over from the series' ending, which I must say was very satisfying. I'd have to say my favorite part was the introduction of telephones for the era because of the time skip gradually making letter writing obsolete, which was a recurring plot point I really enjoyed. It added a sense of finality to it all, considering one of the major aspects of the series was slowly becoming irrelevant. Though maybe a little overlong at nearly 2.5 hours, I thought it was a solid ending for a show that I definitely owe a rewatch to. This one gets a thumbs up from me. That makes sense if you've seen the movie, trust me. So this year I was introduced to a horror-only streaming service called Shudder, and then proceeded to accidentally pay for a year's worth of it somehow. So that's neat. One of Shudder's newest exclusives is Host, a movie set entirely on a Zoom call in the same vein as Unfriended, but with actual creativity and talent behind it. I was smiling the whole way through in spite of how on edge I was. In particular because of the way they did the credits and their acknowledgement of the movie's hour-long length. I don't want to give anything away, but you know if you've seen it. I felt like I was actually watching a genuine conversation between friends, and the added context of having it set during 2020's still relevant quarantine definitely added to the believability for me. Host gets really tense at times and goes for a less is more approach to its scares, which is way more effective in horror in my opinion than constantly being bombarded with loud noises. Not to say that it's jump scare free, but I'm pretty sure Host holds the record for having the first ever jump scare that I actually kind of liked. I don't know what's wrong with me. I have to say it was very strange to have a film referencing the lockdown and masks though. I don't know how well this one will hold up post-COVID, but the fact that they were able to make something this good while in the middle of a pandemic is super impressive. So apparently WB is making hyper-violent Mortal Kombat animated movies now, and I am all here for it. I can't say I've been a huge fan of their straight-to-video DC lineup, but I do watch them from time to time, and they always find a way to sneak in a lot of violence. So that made me very excited when I saw that they made a Mortal Kombat movie with nothing but over-the-top violence. Contrary to the title, much of the story isn't even about Scorpion. They sort of retell the events of the first live-action movie, and I assume the game that I haven't played. So as well as Scorpion, you get a lot from Sonya, Liu Kang, and Johnny as they're introduced to the Mortal Kombat tournament for the first time, which I enjoyed just as much as his Mania's counterpart. The humor was really great too, though there was this weird running joke where Johnny Cage keeps getting kicked in the balls a lot. I don't know what that was all about. Biggest complaint without a doubt has to be the absence of techno music during the fights like the first two live action films before it though. It just feels empty without it. Even though I have zero interest in the games, I'd love to see more of these, so by all means WB, keep them coming. Around the time that cinemas were finally starting to open back up again, my mum decided that she wanted to go out to see a nice, light-hearted movie, and ended up deciding on Unhinged, a movie where Russell Crowe terrorizes a woman and her child because they haunted him once. Needless to say, much of the movie's runtime was spent clutching onto each other for dear life. This is definitely one that I think I enjoyed a lot more because I saw it in theaters and with company after not being able to go out for so long. Though I still think Unhinged was a really tense, concise thriller that doesn't let you stop stressing out until the very end. No thanks in part to some very dumb decisions by the main characters, but hey, I wouldn't be thinking clearly if Russell Crowe was chasing after me either. Perhaps the most notable thing about Unhinged though is that they use Fortnite as a main plot point later on in the film, which if we're being honest makes it like 5 stars from that alone. Also, the studio acknowledged my review highlighting this fact on Twitter, so that's an extra 10 stars. This one was super cute. The main girl Muge was super cute, and the cats were super cute, and this is just a really cute movie. A Whisker Away doesn't have the strongest of plots, but its endearing characters and gorgeous visuals really made me love this one. I'm a pretty big fan of animated slice of life, and this one gives you not only that, but also whimsical fantasy elements that are just so pleasing to look at. I love the magical aspects of it just as much as the coming of age drama, and there were a lot of standout moments for me. I think A Whisker Away has just been obscured a bit by the other incredible anime films that have come out in recent times. I'm not sure if I can agree with the supposed message of pestering someone who is clearly not interested in you until they like you back, but hey, we'll let that slide for now. Regardless, I definitely recommend this one, especially if you're a cat lover, which I'm pretty sure I am now. I love the hell out of time loop movies. They never fail to make me smile with their creative approach to the concept. Except for this one. Unlike Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow before it though, Palm Springs approaches the idea a bit differently, by having Niles, played by Andy Samberg, already being stuck in the time loop and being the one to introduce it to others rather than slowly figuring it out along with the audience. It made it feel very different to other time loop films I've seen. I absolutely loved the dumb humor, it's just my kind of thing. They get so much out of making ridiculous scenarios of characters with no consequences fucking around with people who do. And while not all of the jokes worked for me, I found myself laughing out loud more often than not. Which is thanks to the fantastic script and line delivery. Everyone in this was really good.
Put your hands above your head.
Suck my dick, officer, bitch!
Plus they tie up a very important loose end in a post-credit scene. It had me worried for a sec, but this movie is just that good. This year has been going on for so long that I totally forgot Sonic only came out in February. It feels like decades ago. I already did a full video talking about the Sonic movie, but now that I've had more time to think about it, I do have to agree with the general opinion that outside of the fact that it's a Sonic movie, a lot of aspects of it were quite generic. The highlight of it for me was obviously Jim Carrey as Eggman. I've never had so much fun watching someone have fun in a role before, and the movie would not have been what it was without him. Call it a publicity stunt or not, I just find it so incredible that they managed to turn what was for me one of the least anticipated movies of all time into one I really loved just by listening to people and their cries of terror at the reveal of the original design. I'm almost kind of grateful in a way that they went through with actually making him look like Sonic. This could have been a lot worse. Sonic had me grinning ear to ear as it went on, and I am super excited to see what they do with the sequel. Though obviously there's a lot of bias for me since I'm such a huge Sonic fan. I've already talked about this film a lot, so I'll move on before I repeat myself too much, but Sonic for sure had to be the biggest surprise of 2020 for me. I totally misinterpreted what this movie was about. For some reason, I had it in my head that this would be a funny comedy movie about a gamer stumbling his way through a zombie apocalypse, totally unaware of what was going on. And the title certainly didn't help. But as it turns out, there's nothing funny about this movie except that there's a song in the soundtrack that uses the Inception noise. That was weird. Alive is way too suspenseful at times. The film makes excellent use of its claustrophobic setting to provide a totally fresh take on your typical zombie movie. It was super interesting getting to see the perspective of some random dude stuck in his apartment while all the shit went down outside. The zombies were a little inconsistent, and I'm sure there's a lot to nitpick in terms of the characters' decisions for those who have any form of common sense, but I don't care to be honest. I probably would have just thrown myself off the balcony a day in. And hey, it only has a few jump scares. Woo! Another of this year's discoveries for me is that you can in fact go to the movies by yourself, with the only downside being the judgment of the person you buy the ticket from. My first experience with this was The Invisible Man, which proved to be difficult when I had no one to grip onto in fear. A big draw for me was that the director also did Upgrade, another fantastic movie I suggest checking out, and it definitely shows in this with all of the cool camera tricks they pulled off. I'm struggling to work out how to explain this without sounding like a child, but my favorite kind of horror is when you only see like brief glimpses of the monster or entity as they chase after the protagonist, and this movie did that in spades, with him being invisible and all. Just wish the trailer didn't give away so many of the best scenes in the movie, but I guess that's just how it is now, huh? I didn't find it necessarily terrifying as much as I did ridiculously intense, but I had a really good time with The Invisible Man. It does a lot with an otherwise silly premise. This poster is horrible though. Why would anyone do this?
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
And continuing on my quest to give every movie that came out this year 4 stars is Underwater, a film I enjoyed way more than I thought I would. Underwater hits the ground running and doesn't waste time getting straight into it. Something I don't see very often is getting to find out character dynamics as the movie goes on instead of having it all set up at the beginning. And I really love that the world building is answered gradually through visuals and isn't ever the focus of the scene. It's more about a group of people trying to survive a horrible situation, and it's up to you to watch out for the details and the backstory from there. In terms of horror, I didn't ever find it scary scary despite having all of my biggest fears at once, being trapped in tight spaces, taking place underwater with mysterious creatures lurking around, and TJ Miller. I found the humor grating at first, but it sort of grew on me as it went on. I think it stops the movie from taking itself too seriously. A lot of reviews I read compared it to Alien and the like, and while I agree it started off feeling very familiar, it does steadily become more of its own thing, helped by the incredible special effects work. Underwater's biggest drawbacks are suffering from a few Hollywood lines, as well as the fact that I can't believe we're still doing a silence leading up to obvious loud noise and jump scare in 2020, but the more I think about this one, the more I love it. I can't say much more about it though without giving anything away. Pixar coming in with one of the best films of the year right at the last minute. I don't understand what it is that Pixar does to their movies that just consistently makes me want to cry, but god damn it, they do it every time. Soul felt to me like one of their most mature efforts they put out yet, and for the most part it didn't really feel like much of a kid's movie. It instead just left me feeling inspired and made me want to love life. So of course, here I am editing a 40-minute long video and wanting to die. The animation is of course gorgeous, and the fact that they're able to somehow visually improve with each release is just baffling to me. That being said, I am glad they embraced more of a cartoonish appearance for the characters instead of going fully photorealistic. To me, it made it stand out a lot more. And the Soul stuff has incredible art direction. Everything was really vibrant and visually pleasing, and it's Pixar, of course it is. I was far more invested in the real-world plot than I was the cartoony Soul realm, and to my surprise, they managed to blend both extremely well. On top of that, you've got a fantastic message and very entertaining characters, and though not all of the humor was my thing, it was very hard not to be tearing up by the time the film reaches its very emotionally satisfying conclusion. So overall, it was no Cast 2, but it's pretty good. Birds of Prey and the fabulous, immensive, fancy-pantsy Harley Quinn, whoever titled this needs to be fired. There was a refreshing lack of superhero movies this year, and despite being one, Birds of Prey manages to feel totally different to what I'm used to from both DC and Marvel. It's just a really fun time. I mean, I actually like Harley Quinn now. It's impressive this was able to undo the damage that Suicide Squad had done.
This is Katana!
The action sequences are shot in such a satisfying way, and made even more enjoyable by the film's music choices. It really gets you pumped up and excited as the story continues. I wasn't expecting it to be as funny as it was. It does go for a more Deadpool angle, which I wasn't sure about initially, but I loved overall. Of course, Ewan McGregor was absolutely fantastic. Every scene he was in was just elevated by his hilarious performance. We are way past DC movies being dark and gritty, and I am really looking forward to whatever other crazy shit they've got in the works that isn't Aquaman 2. I watched this one purely because of Joe Keery, because I love Joe Keery, and man am I glad I did. He has such a lovable and charismatic screen presence that it was hard not to be entertained by him, even as he played an absolute piece of shit in this. Spree is a movie about the social media obsessed culture of the internet at the moment, and as overdone as that sounds, it's presented in such an engaging way. Found footage is one of my favorite movie genres because I find it the easiest to get immediately sucked into, and Spree is really creative in how it uses different camera perspectives to continue the story. And for once, it makes sense why the main character keeps filming, since Kurt, Joe Keery's character, is obsessed with attention. Of course he wouldn't turn the camera off. As a critique of social media, I thought certain scenes and one-off lines of dialogue were hitting the message a little too on the nose, but aside from that, I was really impressed and disturbed at how accurate their interpretation of the internet was. One of the best examples I can give without spoiling anything is in the comments that appeared whenever a character was live streaming. It was just as infuriating as reading actual live stream comments. It took a bit of adjustment to hear words like incel and libtard used in an actual movie, and let me tell you, I've never been more glad something was made prior to simp and pog becoming a thing. Kurt even dabs really early on in the movie, which let me know right off the bat that this was going to be amazing. The pacing never lets up right from the get-go, and I had absolutely no idea where this movie was going. Its use of original music and gimmick made it feel really unique. It's been fresh in my mind more so than a lot of the other movies in this video, and I think that's a testament to how well the production was done. I can't recommend Spree enough. Honestly though, overall made me kind of embarrassed to do this YouTube thing for a living if this is how we look to other people. Made in Abyss has to be one of my favorite anime of all time for being a combination of beautiful and absolutely fucking terrifying, and I expected nothing but both from its 2020 movie continuation, Dawn of the Deep Soul. This movie has a lot of things I really loved about it, and it honestly would have been close to a perfect 5 if not for two aspects that kind of bugged me. Both of which are outright spoilers, so I'm just going to say it was a particular aspect of the climax, and this one scene that was just way too far, even for Made in Abyss standards. Like, holy shit, why? The series' haunting soundtrack and atmosphere were even more present on the big screen, and I honestly lost track of time watching it because I was so invested. And the animation was about on par with the show, which I guess just goes to demonstrate how good it was in the series, but they do ramp up the action horror elements at times. This was just a hell of a disturbing ride. It was just so good to dive back into this horrible, fucked up world again. I can't wait for season 2. And finally, my favorite movie of 2020 was... Oh no! Train to Busan is one of my favorite movies, and this is coming from someone who really isn't a zombies fan, in spite of what this video may tell you. Peninsula is essentially an action sequel to a horror movie in the same vein of Alien and Aliens, in that I wouldn't say it's as good as the first, but provides an entirely different viewing experience. The concept of exploring a society built on the ruins of a zombie-infested area is super cool to me, and Peninsula shows a lot of creativity in this department, especially later on in the film. The change in setting and characters within the same world also worked really well, since I think it would have been unnecessary to continue on from the story of Train to Busan. It felt pretty final in that, and I was very glad when this movie was announced to find out that we'd be following an entirely new story. Peninsula definitely has less compelling characters than the first. If I'm being totally honest, I couldn't tell you anything about the cast outside of like the main guy and a few others, but it more than made up for that in its action scenes, which are just so fucking good. I mean, I did not know you could kill a zombie that way. It definitely continued the quality of the tense fight scenes from its predecessor. There is a strange new focus on CGI car chases, which was really the weakest aspect for me, though I think it would be significantly improved if put to initial D music. I definitely understand why people wouldn't enjoy this one, but I had fun with it, okay? And that's about it for 2020. Time to gush and complain about the other movies I saw this year. I'm going to be discussing a selection of my favorite and least favorite films I watched that weren't released in 2020, in no particular order, though of course excluding the movies I've already covered for videos, because I'm sure you've heard me go on about those for long enough, and I won't talk for nearly as long about them all, because there are a lot to get through. So, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this really obscure indie film, The Shawshank Redemption. It's received like no attention ever since it came out, which I think is a shame because this is pretty good. The Back to the Future trilogy has to be one of my favorite series of movies ever, with the second being my favorite of the three. Much like time loops, I love time travel premises so much. I think I just love time a lot. And getting to see this series' version of the future, which was infinitely superior to the real 2015, was just amazing. As someone who could not care less about X-Men or its series of wildly inconsistent movies, Logan has to be not only one of my favorite superhero movies, but just overall all-time favorites. I saw this one back in cinemas, but wanted to rewatch it with my brother, and was pleased to find that I loved it even more the second time round. Logan feels like such a personal and small-scale story, and Hugh Jackman gives an incredible performance. I'm grateful this even exists. This was the second time I saw Knives Out in cinemas, and I'm still blown away by how entertaining and funny this movie is. Daniel Craig is just absolutely amazing in it. I mean, everyone is, with a large ensemble cast you grow to love and hate throughout the film, but he was just the standout performance for me with his weird-ass accent. Aha! Getting to see my brother's reaction, who hadn't seen it before when he first started talking, was just priceless. I adore films that challenge themselves to take place in a single location or room, and it blows me away that a movie about a bunch of old dudes arguing for like an hour and a half can be this compelling and engaging, especially in a movie that's like 300 times as old as I am. 12 Angry Men is just an incredible showcase of talent for everyone involved, and it did not for a second lose my interest. I'm just amazed at this one. As I said earlier, I love found footage to bits, and it's movies like Operation Avalanche that solidify that for me. It's so good at balancing humor and tension as we follow a group of idiots through one of the most important events in human history. And I'm not even sure how it did this, but this one will please both moon landing deniers and competent human beings, which is a hell of an achievement. Black comedies aren't usually my thing. At times the humor can be a little too offbeat for me, but something about The Art of Self-Defense was really entertaining, with a payoff that is absolutely worth the wait. It's movies like this that make me glad I'm as oblivious as I am, so I can't see twists in the story coming, although I am now very concerned about what karate classes are actually like. My very good friend Paper Plane got me to watch through the entirety of Breaking Bad with him this year, and as it turns out, it's actually pretty good. I don't tend to watch many long-form live-action shows anymore, but there's a reason why Breaking Bad is as highly regarded as it is, and its 2019 movie continuation, El Camino, is no exception. I'm sure it would have been a totally different experience having watched this after the 6-year-long release gap, but watching it immediately made it an even more satisfying conclusion to the series, especially one that I started watching because of this Twitter meme.
Jesse, I'm fucking homeless, Jesse.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this really obscure indie film Saving Private Ryan. It's received like no attention ever since it came out, which I think is a shame. I rewatched Bumblebee recently after absolutely adoring it back in cinemas in 2018, and I'm happy to say that it's still everything I could have ever wanted from a Transformers movie, as well as having Haley Steinfeld and John Cena, who are amazing. The smaller scale and focus on less characters makes it more of a lighthearted and fun adventure, which, can you believe, is strangely benefited from the lack of abject sexism and juvenile humor. My only gripes would have had to have been a fairly generic score and some of the jokes falling a bit flat, but I don't care. I love this movie with all my heart. I can only hope future Transformers movies will be even half as good as this. This one was another rewatch, and much like Logan and Bumblebee, it was just as good as when I saw it in cinemas. Something about the dark and gloomy atmosphere present throughout the whole thing makes it such a disturbing and unique watch. I totally get why Joker isn't anything special to some, but I'd truly never seen anything like this before. It had me on the edge of my seat, even though I already knew what was gonna happen. I liked it when he climbed in the fridge. ReZero was another anime I finally got into this year after hearing about it for what feels like my entire life, and boy is this show a lot lot better when everyone isn't dying horribly. As it turns out, there's a reason Tarantino was so revered, and that's because he makes some pretty damn good movies. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has to be one of my favorite films of his I've seen. Leo and Brad Pitt are just incredible in their roles, and the entirely unexpected and shocking ending is so worth the amazing build-up. A lot of YouTube comments seem to think that they don't make violent movies anymore, and if that's the case, I'd like to point your head to Hacksaw Ridge, one of the most terrifying depictions of war I've ever seen. I don't know how they pulled off some of those blood effects, nor do I want to know really, but I loved it. It's probably concerning that I was laughing this hard at a dead body, right? I love the main two guys in the setting of this movie. It felt like a breezy holiday, and I had such a blast laughing my ass off watching it. I don't know what that really says about me. I don't know how a world without kids could be anything other than a utopia, but Children of Men does make a very convincing argument. Yes, I did watch this one for the title alone, and now I have to say that something called I Want to Eat Your Pancreas made me cry. Damn it. Even though I'm pretty sure it was Stockholm Syndrome, my brother finally made me cave and watch all of the Harry Potter movies this year, and though I really didn't enjoy them at first, gradually the series did improve until the finale, which I thought was a brilliant ending to a series that felt like it went on forever. So I hope you're happy now, okay? I love you, Snape. Another one that made me cry was The Way, Way Back, a film that made me fall in love with Sam Rockwell and absolutely despise Steve Carell. He plays a piece of shit a little too well. Halloween is one of the most patient horror films I've ever seen, if that makes sense. The way that it builds up suspense and tension is unmatched, and accompanied by the unnerving atmosphere and brilliant cinematography made it the best in the genre for me. I love it when they put spooky shit in the background for you to notice, and Halloween does that a lot. My only complaint would have to be that they play the Michael Myers theme literally like every 5 minutes. I know it's a great song, but just relax. I'm somehow not familiar with the source material of Little Women, and let me tell you, after watching this, I want to go back to 1868 and scream with the author for making a story this enchanting and yet simultaneously frustrating. This movie is like a warm hug and kick in the balls at the same time, and the only reason it's not 5 stars is because it didn't end the way I wanted it to, so take that, movie. Lake Mungo is undoubtedly the scariest movie I've ever seen, and deciding to watch it at 12 in the morning is simultaneously the best and worst decision of my life. I did not sleep very well that night. Space horror is not a genre that gets a lot of love, and that's because Alien did it so well in the 70s that it can feel like everything is just trying to rip it off. But life felt different enough to me despite its similar premise. This movie is ridiculously terrifying, and I hate Starfish now. I didn't watch nearly enough Ghibli movies this year, considering they're all on Netflix now, but my favorite would have had to have been Kiki's Delivery Service. It's cute, it's relatable, and it's just a relaxing, adorable time. I love it. I also watched Castle in the Sky, which I loved as well. It's a totally different experience than Kiki's, but it's just such a fun adventure, and the film is absolutely gorgeous. Plus, I really like the robot. The last Ghibli movie I watched was the infamous Spirited Away, which is such a magical film. It's hard to describe what makes it so great, but there's just really nothing quite like it. As soon as the theme played in a later scene, I knew that I loved this movie, and I'm glad it's so widely praised. It deserves all of the appreciation it gets. Plus, No Face is adorable, and I love him. I have an unfortunate problem where I kind of actually really love romance movies, and 5 Feet Apart is so cute and so beautiful, and it's not fair. Another rewatch this year was The Raid and its sequel, and strangely, I didn't like the first one as much, but I love the second more. Regardless, both have incredible fight scenes that to me are just unmatched in their intensity and choreography. And the original Raid's claustrophobic and brutal setting makes it such a stressful yet exhilarating experience. This is as good as action movies get, if you ask me. Tom Cruise is so over the top and gives such a dedicated performance in Jerry Maguire. It's a really touching redemption story, and I love seeing his character develop over the course of the movie. I honestly didn't think I'd enjoy this one as much as I did, but here it is, turning out to be one of the best films I got to see this year. Boyhood is a film that I think your enjoyment of it will depend on how much you can relate to it. For a nearly 3-hour-long movie, it's unique in that what actually happens in it doesn't serve an overarching plot. You're just watching various scenes of a kid growing up and experiencing life, and things just happen as part of his development rather than leading up to something satisfying. Which I totally get on paper, sounds like it'd be boring as hell, but I don't know, something about this movie really got to me. And near the end, when this song kicks in, I just started bawling my eyes out. This movie took 12 years to make, and it was worth every bit of that time. I don't know if you've heard of this really obscure indie. Parasite was a strange one because it didn't really do much for me while I was watching it. Like, I thought it was good, but nothing mind-blowing. But it was the fact that it stuck with me for so many days after, and even now, that I realized what makes this movie so special. It has a fantastic set of main characters in the family, a unique setting, gorgeous cinematography, and a really unique plot that I just could not predict at any point. This movie deserves all of the praise it got. It's a film like no other I've ever seen. I realized this year that I loved Haley Steinfeld, and going into this knowing that I always cry at coming-of-age high school films, I don't know why I was surprised that I was crying at this wonderful coming-of-age high school film. As much as Marriage Story was memed to shit, it doesn't take away from how strong Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's performances are and how this movie made me realize that I never want to get married ever. This is the highest rating I'm ever gonna give to a movie with so many fart jokes in it. Captain Underpants so perfectly captures the spirit of the books I was a huge fan of as a kid, and its animation is so expressive and creative. I cannot believe I love this one as much as I did. Oh, and speaking of movies I can't believe I enjoyed, no one says a single word in this for like an hour and a half, because they're all sheep. It's amazing. Whiplash is easily the most stressful and intense film I've ever had the pleasure of going into completely blind, and it did not let go of my heart for its nearly 2-hour runtime. J.K. Simmons is terrifying in this, and I'm going to run for my life if I ever get stuck in the same room as him. Yeah, The Matrix is still just as cool all this time later. I had the exciting experience of accidentally spoiling what a Matrix was to my brother, who had somehow never heard of the expression, so that was fun. Alright, that's enough positivity, time for the worst. I watched this one on my birthday, and it was so much worse than I could have ever possibly imagined. Jack and Jill tortures you for an hour and a half before allowing your soul to ascend to heaven with its only saving grace, the Dunkachino sequence.
It's dunk!
Which I sadly can't say made the whole thing worth it. Jesus Christ, Adam Sandler. Apparently the director of Prevenge somehow made and starred in this while she was actually pregnant, which is extremely impressive, but this is one of those movies that proves to me why black comedies and slashes aren't really my thing. Although maybe it was because the killer baby sounded like a Teletubby.
Listen to the sound of my voice.
I knew just how terrible The Happening was supposed to be going into it, and I was still blown away by how awful this entire thing is. I'm no usual critic of M. Night, I've liked the majority of the movies I've seen from him so far, but I refuse to believe the dialogue in this was written by an actual human being and not an alien trying to imitate our language. Alright, this one's gonna piss a lot of people off, and I probably deserve it. Before anyone says anything, I don't think this is a poorly made film by any means. It's definitely just my long-standing hatred of musicals that ruined The Nightmare Before Christmas for me. I thought that La La Land and The Greatest Showman had redeemed musicals in my eyes, but as it turns out, I still really hate movies that convey important events through song. It's not even song, it's just they're singing what they're doing. Also, I was half asleep while watching it, so that probably didn't help either. I think I am one of 2 people who actually likes the 2003 Rock Doom movie. Not because I think it's amazing or anything, but I had fun with it. 2019's Doom Annihilation, instead of improving upon any of the issues people had with the first movie, diverges even further from the source material, and a film that aside from one decently cool sequence right at the end is just completely lifeless. Please don't watch this. I did not enjoy the first Purge movie. Surprisingly, such a dumb premise turns out to make for a pretty dumb movie.
Please just let us purge.
But I was hoping maybe the sequel could improve upon what I didn't like. Evidently, it's actually somehow even worse, with bland characters and a plot that I just didn't care about. I'm aware that there's 2 more in the series, and now I can confidently say that I'm not missing out on anything by not watching them. Bliss is another one of those movies that I don't think is necessarily poorly made or anything, but it's just not my thing. It's essentially a 90-minute long headache that I'm really not sure what the point of it all was. The painting was cool though. Wolves 2014 has to be one of the funniest bad movies I've ever seen in my life. I don't see a lot of films that I don't like but still enjoy watching, and in that regard this was the highlight of the year for me. It's directed by David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake, which I think is really cool, but it also has werewolf nipples and werewolf sex scenes, which is not really cool. The difference in opinion about Spring Breakers is pretty interesting, although I'm in the camp of people who didn't enjoy it despite the really strong atmosphere. It just felt like James Franco going Spring Break for the whole thing. That's all he does for the entire movie. It's just like Spring Break. Gladiator is one of the most boring movies I've ever watched in my life. I don't necessarily think that it's not well put together, but the first like 50 minutes just goes on for what feels like 20 years. I did enjoy the action sequences later on in the film, but I've genuinely had more fun in school than watching this. They also use this really shitty looking slow motion effect throughout the movie, and I don't know if this is just me, but it looks so amateurish. It looks like something you do on Windows Movie Maker. I'm not familiar with Sam Raimi's work outside of emo Peter Parker, and I'm still not quite sure what the horror comedy genre is really supposed to be, but Drag Me to Hell just felt mean for no reason. It seemed like a pretty gross and mean-spirited film that I think I need to watch a few more movies in the genre to properly get. Holy shit, this was a miserable trilogy. You'd think by assembling this much talent, you'd be able to make something special, but instead you get a movie that utilizes none of the big-name stars attached to it, and instead becomes something so generic and forgettable that I'm glad I don't have a lot to say about it. I liked The Expendables 2 a lot more than the first, so I was hoping this would continue on a high note, but it somehow ends up being the worst of the 3. This is just a huge missed opportunity for something amazing.
Oh my god, they're rich. Look at how much money they have. Oh my god.
Another one I might get shit for, but this has to be one of the most nothing movies I've seen in a while. There's literally no conflict in the film until right at the very end, and even then it's hardly a big deal, as opposed to the main focus of showing off expensive sets and clothes and people. It just didn't feel like anything more than that to me, but I'm glad other people seem to get a lot more out of it. And just before we finally wrap things up, I wanted to talk about a few of the best shows I watched this year, or if you're somehow not tired of listening to me ramble yet. I remember there being a lot of hype around the Infinity Train Train pilot a few years back, and now that the show is finally released, I'm glad to say it fully lives up to that hype. Each season offers something different with a new cast and protagonist to follow, and the series melds humor and mystery so damn well. I love the characters and the idea of it so much. This is undoubtedly one of the best efforts Cartoon Network has had to offer in a long time, and I am anxiously awaiting the next season's announcement now that it's on the American-only HBO Max. Bee and Puppy Cat is the sister series to Channel Frederator's Bravest Warriors, a show that I liked a lot as a kid but not so much now. And I'd always written off Bee and Puppy Cat as something I wouldn't enjoy. Well, I'm glad I couldn't have been any more wrong because I love this series to bits. The art style is so visually appealing and comfy, and the show's humor is completely offbeat yet hilarious. The whole thing's available to watch on YouTube too, which I think is just incredible. I hope they make more of this because I couldn't love it enough. Netflix's Castlevania anime has been strong since its first season and surprised the hell out of me, especially as someone who has never played or cared about the Castlevania games. Season 3 continued the level of quality and violence I've come to expect from this series. Though I found this season the weakest one so far due to the separated and disconnected story arcs, Castlevania continues to be so good I still can't believe it's an actual thing.
What the fuck is toilet paper?
Officially dethroning Toradora as my favorite anime comes Kaguya-sama Love is War Season 2. I loved the hell out of the first season, and somehow, by what feels like a miracle, this year's season proved to be even better with the addition of new characters and the occasional serious story. It's amazing how much the series is able to make me laugh yet care so much about the characters and their relationships. I hope they never stop making this show. A series unashamedly about the passion the creators have for the process of creating anime. Keep Your Hands Off Aizoken follows a lovable trio as they go about making their own animations in such a creatively designed world. This show made me appreciate the work that goes into these things even more. It's astounding just how much goes into animation. I knew that something was very off about this show before I went into it, but I was not quite prepared for how fantastic this would be. In spite of what it looks like, Madoka Magica is one hell of a ride, and I'm never going to be able to trust magical girls again. And last but not least, for my first and only non-animated entry comes the third season of Stranger Things, which continues to be as amazing as ever. I fell in love with this series a while back, and while I didn't think the second season was as strong as the first, season 3 I think has to be my favorite, with the incredible mall setting and more focus on telling individual stories that all converge at the end. I don't think there was a single subplot I didn't love, and the increased screen time to Steve was obviously very much appreciated. And that about wraps up this extremely overlong summary of my favorites and least favorites from 2020. In spite of everything, there were a lot of highlights this year that I'm grateful for. Though I do hope next year is a little bit easier, because I don't think any of us can take much more of this. I'm not sure when this video is going to come out considering its immense length, so I'm just going to say Happy New Year to you all, and I look forward to creating even more dumb videos for you to watch in 2021. Thanks for watching everyone, and see you then.